Hello, everybody. Um, Glad you could join us today. My name is Brett Goldman. I'm one of the developers here. I also work with a lot of integrations and professional services here at Axosoft. And join with me, who's going to be starting off or doing most of this webinar, is someone that, if you guys have reached out to us in our customer success team, or even if you haven't reached out to us, he may have reached out to you, and just make sure that you guys are having a great time with Axosoft, and if you had any questions. All right, so let me go ahead and hand you off to Jonathan here, and he's going to get started showing you all the great new things we have with Axosoft version 16.3. Jonathan?
All right, thank you very much, Brett. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 16.3 webinar. If you're new, welcome to our webinars. If you're recurring attendee, welcome back. It's great to have you back. And so let's go ahead and dive into the agenda, and then we'll dive into the actual Axosoft application to show off some of the new features we have for 16.3. And so I'll be kicking it off with work log templates, plus a few other updates related to the release planner, and one additional update that I'll go over in detail with the card view. And then Brett will actually take over and talk about some of the new gadgets that we've added. So you may see that we've now included 2 gadgets, cycle time and flow. And so those are 2 major gadgets that hopefully will be very useful to you and your team. And following that, we'll dive into Q&A. We're reserving the last 15 minutes for Q&A. Hopefully, we'll end a little early so we can add a little bit more time for those questions. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into it. So you should hopefully see my card view. And the first feature I'm going to go over today is the new work logs field template. And so what is this? So let me start here by hitting W on my screen, and I'm going to pull up a work log. And my work log might look different than your work log depending on what you've done so far in 16.3. Maybe you've already taken advantage of it and you have a pretty good idea of what's possible, but let me break it down for you. And so typically when you add a work log, it used to be that you could only set the user. Right now I'm the administrator, so I can add and I have permissions to add as anyone else. You would tell Axosoft how much work was performed, the date, and the only field that you had access to was this work type on whether it was billable or non-billable. And that was it. You could save the record and then you continue on with your work. But what you've noticed, what we've done here, is that I've added the ability to add default fields, custom fields, and I'm going to show you how to do that now that you have this 16.3 version. And so to take advantage of work log field templates, you're going to go to Tools, Fields, Field Templates, and it's going to be located under the Projects, Customers, Contacts, and Work Logs. Projects, Customer Contacts, and Customers can also be customized in the same way, but we're going to focus on work logs. And so the functionality should be very familiar, especially if you're the administrator for your team, or even if you're not. Just these are good things to be aware of so that you can make these types of requests when you're looking to get the right type of information in your field template, and in this case for the work logs template. And so what I've done here is, first of all, the drag and drop functionality is much the same as when you're just trying to drag and drop fields in your field template for your items. And the default values can now be set to, and so one of the biggest requests that we had is this work type field is what most folks typically try to customize when trying to get more information out of work logs. We now give you the ability to set something by default to billable or by default to non-billable, hopefully something that will save you some legwork and add some automation. And then the other thing that we've also introduced are custom fields. So the examples I have here are just some of the requests that I've been collecting from customers. And so these may or may not be custom fields that you will use, but these are just some examples of how this could be very helpful. So for example, you could have a billing rate. Now this might not be something you actually need in the work log. As I was mentioning earlier, each customer or customer contact can also have custom fields. So maybe you want to put the billing rate against that record. And I'll show you why that might be helpful. So in the meantime, I'm going to take it out. I've added a new text field called developer notes. And so it might be different than description, but I can have both large text fields available if I'm looking to collect additional information. I've had a use case billing code. And so maybe you have multiple billing codes. So when you export this data, you have additional information. There's additional massaging that has to occur with the data. And so having this type of information might be useful to you. Or perhaps you're looking for department. And so essentially, most of the custom fields that you're used to are available. And so date, time, large text, list, number, field. If you need to create a list, Once you create a list, you can jump to the shortcuts. And in this case, you can see how I've customized the billing code custom field. But these are all available for edit from Tools, Fields, Lists, or with the shortcut that you see here when you're editing the field template for work logs. So everyone's already familiar with what a work log is. We just wanted to introduce the major functionality that hopefully adds some depth for you. And I want to briefly tie into why it could be very important to at least not only the PMs or the stakeholders, but maybe your billing team. And so I'm going to hop over to the Work Logs tab. If you're not familiar with the Work Logs tab, it is a tab that is available to you when you click the plus icon, and it should be located right here. If you do not see it, I'm going to take a moment to show you how you can enable it. You can go to the Tools, System Options, and underneath General, this is where you can control what tabs are enabled for the entire system. And in this case, I've made sure the checkbox for work logs is enabled. You'll notice that you can also check other boxes as well. If you, for example, want to take advantage of your audit trails, that's a historical record of all the items in your system, and you can also review the other tabs as well. Okay, so we're back to the Work Logs tab. And what I'm looking at right now is I'm looking at all the work logs that have been logged in my system since the beginning of time. Since I'm using sample data, it's actually not that many. But what you can do now that you've added custom fields is that you can add those custom fields as columns to your grid data. And the reason why that's really important is because that will then carry over into the reporting or exporting that you perform from the Work Logs tab. And so in my case, I have added a work log custom field billing code, but I could also include billing rate, department, users. And let me actually get into, you can also add customer data and customer contact data. So please be aware that not only can you add custom fields from your work log field template, but if you have custom fields for your customer contact and your customer, which is the same concept, you just go to Tools, Fields, Field Templates, but you would edit the customer's field template instead of the work logs, you can include perhaps a billing rate. So maybe every item could be associated to a customer contact, and as a result, all that information will carry over for your export. So that's just one use case that you could potentially explore. But once you've, in this case, I've only logged a few work logs here with some custom data here. And then what you can do is you can do one of two things. So first, you have the actual print icon, which will take an exact copy, exact printout, I should say, of what you have in your work logs tab. And it will respect your grouping, your sorting, and it'll try to fit in as much as possible. The only limitation here is the real estate of your printer paper, and it will go ahead and print it out. The other thing you can do, of course, is print to PDF. Let me go back to my other tab here. And the other thing you can do is you can actually export this to CSV. And so it may be, so here's the export button. It may be that you need to, take the billing rate or take some value, some integer value, and perform some additional calculations outside of the Axosoft product, maybe just in an Excel sheet or a Google Doc. You can go ahead and do that now with the addition of this new data and include it in your exports. And so in my case, I already have billing code department already checked because they're already columns, but you can also include other types of information as well. And you'll get a CSV that looks much like this. In this case, I have a few items that have the billing code and department already started since I just added these custom fields today. But you can go ahead and begin capturing this data and hopefully making much better use, getting much more value out of Axosoft now that it can capture additional pieces of information when your developers or your team members go in and start logging some work. And so those, again, it's all in the work logs field template. Where do you add a work log? You can add a work log just by selecting the item, hitting W. One last little Easter egg. If you have a work log record selected and you want to add an additional work log on top of it, you have the ability to actually right-click and jump to add a work log. Wasn't something that was there before. That is something that you can do now. And in this case, this is my work log field template. I hope you make use of it. You can now require fields. You can now default fields. You can now rearrange fields and hopefully get that information into your reporting. Okay, so I do have two more things that I do want to show you guys. The first one is a segue from the work logs issue that I was showing you there, the work logs feature, I should say, that I was showing you initially. And let me quickly resize my sheet here. Okay, And let me select sprint 3. So we made an update to the release planner. It's pretty straightforward. It used to be that when you created, you planned your sprints, it used to be that once you planned it, you would then transition over to your dashboard, to your daily stand-up to get a picture of how things are going. What we've done with version 16.3 is we've made it so that work logs update your release planner. So it used to be that the work logs would not update. And so what field in particular is being updated? Well, I'm over here in item number 43. And let me just use this as an example here. Right now, this has a remaining estimate of 0, but if it had a remaining estimate of 4, then that's the value. So there would be 4 hours remaining, right, on this item that would be contributing, that would be consuming your user's capacity. And so let me look over here on the right side. So for example, I'm looking at Drew. Drew's item selected here is item 33. And it used to be if Drew were to create a work log for item 33 and say he finished it off, it used to be that this would not get updated. It would still say 12 hours remaining. We now confirm that if we do that, let me see if I can find Drew's item here. Here it is, work log. And let's do the full 12 hours. And I'll go ahead and log it as Drew. All right. All right, then that time is now freed up. And so the remaining estimate value is updated here in the release planner, which will then cascade up to the capacity. And the reason why this might be helpful to you is because, so say I have Hazel here, who has 40 hours of capacity, and I'm comparing her to, say, Floyd. And in a hypothetical sprint, let's say both Floyd and Hazel were fully allocated for their previous sprint. So they're each allocated 40 hours and 40 hours. But Hazel got all her work done very early, and she performed all her work logs. However, before, you wouldn't be able to differentiate between Floyd and Hazel in the release planner in terms of how much capacity Hazel was actually available for versus how much Floyd might be available for. So now with the work log updating capacity, you'll be able to see that in the release planner. Okay, Hazel actually finished up already, and I can give her more items. Oh, it looks like Floyd might be over allocated. Let me take away some and maybe give them to Hazel. So that would be one of the major use cases that you now get with being able to log work logs and have that update the release planner. Okay, and my last major item before I hand it over to Brett has to do with a card view. And so let me go over here. And so say I want to be, so say I'm logged in as Hazel right now. And say Hazel is a stakeholder. So she's a project manager, a product owner. She's not really a developer, but she is someone who determines whether or not a user story or an item is approved or rejected. And that's really the only 3 workflow steps that she's working out of. So she works out of new, approved, and then this last one over here, rejected. And so what she would have to do in order to reject an item is drag and drop it all the way to the right side. And what we've done with 16.3 is we've made one change, which might make things a little easier for her. So let me just do this right here. Let me start with, hey, let me move this back. Okay, so you may have just noticed that my screen just changed. So now, instead of having the full workflow, I have new, approved, rejected. And so you might be asking, Jonathan, what's going on? What happened to those workflow columns? Well, we've added a new setting that hides any workflow columns that are restricted via allowed next steps, I should say, and security roles. And so let me show you how that works. So let me hop over here to my admin. So this is my same account, just administrator. And so the setting that we're talking about here is located under Tools, System Options, and it's under Card View Settings. And here's the setting I've enabled. I'm telling Axosoft to hide prohibited workflow steps. Okay, that's great. So it's turned on, but what does that mean? So if we go into the same card view that Hazel's looking at here, and I'm the administrator, I have all my items are currently in new. And if I were to examine, so I'm going to right click on the new workflow step in card view, and I'm going to edit the workflow step. I'm going to go to allow next steps. And this is basically what's going to be controlling what workflow columns I can see. So right now I have set so that any item sitting in new, the only people who can move it to approved is everyone. But I might want to limit that so I don't have testers or any developers being able to do that. And the only people who can move an item from new to rejected are, again, everyone, but I might want to limit that just to a few key roles. Right now, there is no one who is able to move an item from new to in progress, from new to ready for testing, or from new to completed. So this is the allowed next step that we have in force in the system. And I've done the same thing for each and every single one of my for the new workflow step, and also for the let's take a look here. Thank you. All right, I've done the same thing for approved. So you'll notice something interesting though. So as soon as I move an item from new to approved, I now gain access to the in progress workflow step column because that's an allowed next step. And as soon as I move an item from in progress to from approved to in progress, the other workflow steps that are also allowed become enabled. So this is just one way to save some real estate. If you have users who only really work out of three workflow steps out of your entire workflow, then this might be one great way of simplifying their view and already taking advantage of the allowed next steps that you have in the system. So it's a quick setting, but it's just good to know about allowed next steps, just so that you know how to put that all together for your users. And if you have any questions, more than happy to answer that as we go along. Okay, so I've talked about the major work logs update and how that affects hopefully your billing team in a positive manner. Quick update on the release planner, and also an update on the card view. And so those are my items there. I'll go ahead now and hand it over to Brett, who will get to the dashboard gadgets that we have for you, cycle time and flow in Axosoft.
All right, great. So there we go. And I'm now sharing my screen. Let me go ahead and hide this here. So all of you should just see, again, just my Axosoft sample database. And the two things that I'm going to be showing off here are a couple of new dashboard gadgets that we created. And these are two things that are very popular for a lot of people that use Kanban or for help desk teams that you have, and actually have been really helpful, for us here at Axosoft, just to see what our process really looks like. So I'm going to just call this my flow dashboard. And the two new gadgets that we have are one here called flow, and then for cycle time. So let me just grab the cycle time here first. And this just works very similar to any of the other gadgets that you might have, where you can first just filter, okay, what items you want to actually be looking at. For the cycle time, because we're looking at how long something takes to complete, I would probably recommend just placing a filter that looks for, okay, all closed or all completed items, just because, if we're looking at average times, like how long something was spent open, it would probably be helpful just to look at only things that have fully completed the process, just so it's not kind of like a mix of data. You can place any other type of filter restrictions here that we have, then we can also just group the data. So I'm going to just have a real basic one that I can go ahead and show you what it looks like. And let me drag it and make it bigger for all of you guys here. And what I have here is just a simple column chart that shows just kind of like the cycle of all of my items that I'm filtering by. So each of these series are a different status that I have. So right here, I can look at all of Floyd's items, and all of his items were open for like a total of 54 hours, and they were in the open step for 40 of those hours, and then they were in progress for 10 hours, and then they were actually in testing for about 4 hours. So about from the time that they were moved from in progress to be in testing, our testers had an average about 4 hours from the moment it was available to them to the point where they finish all their tests and move it on, which is actually quite a good average. This is just sample data, so it's probably not more as real worldly as we have. But that's basically the idea of what we have, is that each of these blocks refers to just kind of like the average amount of time that each of your items are spending in each status. So right now I'm actually just grouping by the assigned to field. So we can see everything broken down by who it was assigned to. So we can see that, okay, well, Hazel, jumps on items, a little bit more quickly than Drew does, an average of about, 20 hours or so there. So that might be important, it might, not be, it might just be that, they work in different departments and have different processes. But just by grouping by different data, you can really get a lot of good insight here. So like maybe if I were to group by priority, here I can see I've got my high priority items and how long those take for me to actually be responded to and start working on those items. So actually, if this were real data, this would probably pose a bit of a problem because I'm getting to my medium priority items much more quickly than at my high priority items. So maybe there's something there that maybe I'm not setting enough bells and whistles that say, okay, something with high priority has come up. Let's go ahead and address it. It is good because we can see that once it is moved in progress, they're addressed very quickly. But we want to see that that anything that needs attention is in fact getting that attention. So now I want to talk a little bit just more about how we're actually getting this data. So one of the major updates we had in the past version was we did a big update just to audit trails to give you more information, but also so that we can track all of your items along their process a little bit better and build these graphs out. So what we're actually looking at here is the number of hours that an item is spending in each status. So we do have a couple of things that we can figure actually how that number is calculated. So by default, I do have this parameter that says to include weekends. Just like in your burn down or other charts, you can choose to include weekends in your calculation or ignore weekends here. So if you work just Monday through Friday, you should probably actually just continue to exclude the weekends there. So basically, if something comes in on Saturday and it's open all Saturday, open all Sunday, it's not counting that time against me as part of my cycle time. So the other piece that we have is that we also have a start time and end time, and those are actually the start time and end time of the day, when you open up shop and then when you eventually close. So what I have here is just the default, which is the standard 9 to 5 shop. So which means that if I get something at 9 in the morning and then I finally get to it at 10 o'clock, that only counts as 1 hour of my cycle time. However, if something comes in at 5:01 and I don't get to it to the next day until 10 o'clock, that also is only 1 hour because it was only open from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. So this really helps you just kind of get a good look at how long it's taking you to respond to certain items, and also how long items spend in each particular step. So again, if you guys are just a 24-hour shop, you would probably want to set the start time to 12 a.m. And the end time just to 12 a.m. So now we can see the amount of time it actually spent being open is significantly more than when I was just taking in my working hours, my 9 to 5 there. All right. So a couple of other things about this is that you can also change so that right now I was grouping by status, but you can also group by workflow step. So we do have those two fields, status and workflow step. Workflow step has a lot of other great automated features and security features built in. And you can also have a variety of different workflow steps for different projects or different item types that you have there. But status is just more of like a general field that you can have just for when an item's open, it's in progress, it's in testing and closed. So if you have a really rigorous workflow, which is sometimes required for teams, we don't want you to have a cycle that has all these different series and could be confusing. Maybe if you've got 10 steps in your testing process, but you really want to know, okay, just how long was it in testing? You might want to use the status field as opposed to the workflow step field, but just know that they are both, in fact, available to you. All right. So right here, each of these bars do include how much time is spent in each step. But you'll notice that I've got a couple different options here. So right now, this is just my my approved step. So everything that I'm looking at has at one point been approved, and anything that was moved into the approved step spent about 102 hours there. That's the average time per item. Okay. Now, if I look at the in progress step, you'll notice that I've got another another entry there that says average. So that shows the average time that an item that is actually moved into this step, how long that one spends in there. So now we can see, okay, well, only 6 of the 7 items actually made it to be in progress, and the items that were actually moved to be in progress are about 52 hours there. So this is good because it gives you a look at both things. So like if you have a particular step, like maybe it's reopened. So say that you have 100 items, only 5 of them are reopened to have someone look at. This allows you both to look at how much the average item spends in the reopened stage and how much time the item that is reopened, how long it spends in that stage. So it's a good way just to give you both of those pieces of data. All right. Great, so that's kind of like the cycle time one. It's great for developers just to be able to just identify any bottlenecks that might be in your testing process or in your ramp-up process that we have. But we've actually found that it's great for our success team and even our sales team. So, you know, some things that you don't typically think about, you know, okay, well, our sales team also uses Axosoft. How can we take a look at how well they're serving our customers? We can see, okay, how long does it take from when an email is sent to our sales team till they'll actually be able to reach out and make a first contact. We can track all of that just using the cycle time here. And also the great thing about that is that, you know, we have different hours for our sales team and support team, and just by editing the gadget, we can then edit the start time and end time. So like if we offer 24-hour support or extended hours support, we can see how quick they're getting back to their customers versus our sales team that might keep different hours and how quickly they can respond just to any emails. Okay, so the cycle time chart here just looks at just any data and actually kind of grouped there, but it's not really like a calendar view of everything. And that's actually why we have the next option here, which is the flow chart. So some of you might be familiar with this as a cumulative flow chart right here. And what this shows is that it shows similar information. It's still showing items based on their status or workflow step, but it's more of a calendar basis, more of a timeline view. So right now I'm just looking at the last 30 days, and the y-axis here is just how many items are in each step at the end of each day. So you know, I'm pretty much a new customer here. I opened it up on May 17th. I threw in a couple of items, 10 items there, and then I started to work on them. So now at the end of the 18th, I had 10 items that were open there, and then on the next day, I moved a couple of them to be in progress and moved one to be in testing. All right. So kind of like ideally here, we would just see items go through your workflow and eventually hopefully be closed and taken off my plate. So kind of like the idealized version of a graph like this would just be like a perfect triangle. You know, if you get 10 items a day and you can close them out and move them through your workflow, this would just kind of be like a straight line. And then each of these steps, if you had an ideal process, would actually kind of be another layer or another lamina, if you're a math geek like myself, on top of that step. So basically, this allows you to see how many items are in each step along the process. So This darker blue right here is my testing stage. So right here I can see, okay, on June 1st, I had 5 items that were that were ready for testing that weren't actually worked on until like the next day. So while it's, it's 5, it's a little bit smaller of a number, it is the largest time that I do have in testing here. And we could see like, oh, well, maybe that was a bottleneck. Was there something in my process there? Maybe it's something that, well, all of my testers have a lot of things to do at this particular time in the in my cycle, and they're not as available, and their work is kind of piling up. You can actually just see that by the number of items by each day that are on their plate. Okay. So a couple other neat things that we do have with this chart is, and one of the reasons why we call it flow rather than cumulative flow is because this right here is in fact a cumulative flow diagram. It's adding up everything that is closed. But one of the neat things that I like for this cumulative flow graph over, say, some others is that we can actually hide different series. So if I were to hide my in progress or hide my closed items and my open items, now I'm looking at items just as they appear in my progress in my actual work cycle. So now I've kind of gotten rid of some of the other noise, and now I can see, okay, there really was a big spike here on June 1st. Maybe there was something about my process that I can smooth it out there, and a lot of this data is now no longer lost just because I have got all the other series. So not only does this help you look at everything as it is in your cycle, how long it takes from when an item is in progress to be in testing, but it also allows you to look at your cycle time versus your lead time. So let me look at the workflow step because I've got a couple more workflow steps that I do statuses. And I can do the same here where if I just want to look at my, say, my lead time, so now I want to see, okay, how long does it take for when an item is new to be approved? So actually, I'm really good here. We can see everything that is added to my queue is approved by the end of the day, which is actually phenomenal. Most teams typically don't do that until the past couple days when I do have a couple of items that are being added which aren't then actually moved to be approved by the end of the day. Oh, sorry, there was a refresh. Currently, there is a bug where if you refresh, it'll lose the options there. But if you're working on here, you can actually just turn off the refresh, and that'll just keep everything by itself there, so we can look at just the series that we want. So this is great because I can look at everything with my lead time. So how long are items taking from the point when they're either created by my customers or my product owner or stakeholders until the time that they're approved or designed until they get into my developers' hands. We can take a look at that by itself. We could take a look at, of course, the big picture if we have everything everything all here. And then we can also just look at the cycle time itself and just see the time, just kind of like a timeline view of just my actual workflow process when my developers get an item and start working on it, if there's anything there that we might be able to facilitate. Great, so those are kind of like the two new gadgets that we do have. They work great together. They're very good complementary because we can just see what we have here, just like in the number of hours, how long each item is actually spending in each step, as well as kind of more of like a timeline view. So like if there's any particular time of the month or time in your cycle that you see bottlenecks, you can also then really see those well here in the flowchart. So those are charts we have, and the flowchart actually works really well. I like it in tandem with the burn down chart as well. So let me go ahead and create a quick burn down chart. And I'll set my release. Actually, I think both of these have, yeah, so both of these have the global setting for the release. So let me just set my global parameter just to be sprint 1. Okay, so if I was looking back at sprint 1, I can see the burn down chart, which just shows me the amount of work that was done each day. And then as I add work logs, it'll burn down. And then right here with my flowchart, I can just see kind of the total number of items as they come on. So they're kind of opposites. One will be going down while the other one will be going up. But they're really great complements of each other, and can really give you a lot of information heading into those sprint retrospective meetings, just to see, okay, is there anything I could have done better during this time frame? All right, great. So I apologize, my throat is just about closing up, which is perfect timing, because now we want to just go ahead and throw it just to some questions. So I've seen Jonathan typing away, and hopefully getting back to some of you guys with any questions that you do have. If you do have any questions, you can just go ahead and ask them right here, and we'll stick around answering those for a little bit. But if anything else does pop up, just always feel free just to shoot us an email at success@accessoft.com. It'll probably be Jonathan or one of our team helping you out there. All right, so Jonathan, how are those questions coming on?
Okay, there's only been a few questions that have been coming in. I think one of the bigger questions was, hey, do I need to have the Scrum module in order to have access to the charts? And that is the case. Yes, you must have access to the Scrum module, or if you're on any of our current plans and it's already included in your enterprise or professional plan. If you're installed customer, then you of course have it already installed as well, as long as you're on version 16.3. All right, let me see here if there's any other questions. All right, it doesn't look like there's any major questions coming in, but as always, if you do have questions, I'm happy to enthusiastically answer them as best I can. And as Brett was saying, you can email us at success@accessoft.com. You can give us a call at 800-653-0024 extension 2, or also subscribe to our YouTube channel. We should have this recording up and ready for you in the next 48 hours, and you'll also be receiving an email from GoToWebinars with the download link as well. So we're being super thorough for you as well. So I think that concludes our webinar for today. It looks like most questions were already answered during the session. Thank you so much for your time, and I wish you a splendid Tuesday and a great rest of your week. Thanks, folks.